Hello and welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and you're listening to episode 145 with Jack Fitzgerald, DP of Masters of the Air. Enjoy.
I'm doing a project for Amazon's, and our reference is Heat, 48 Hours, the original, Drive, and then there's a bunch of very obscure films that the showrunner has put up as his favorite movies, which don't always necessarily translate to what we're up to, but just to get in his headspace. So yeah, I've been doing that as well as getting on with work. So yeah. I haven't been watching too much of anything what's currently coming out, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, when he's giving you those references, are those more visual or tonal?
Can be both. I think for him, a lot of them are tonal. And again, like I said, it's more just to get into the mind of his
vibe.
Yeah. And then the directors and I work. Then we go into our own, little corner about what's visual and what's tonal for us for this upcoming project.
Yeah. When you're doing pre-production on anything, are you like kind of the type of person who's like just point at what you want for it to look like, or do you like to come at it with kind of some predispositions of sorts?
Definitely come at it with a predisposition for sure, because it's, for this project, it's working with the directors that I worked with on Masters of the Air. So we already have
the shorthand,
shorthand and a friend, collective. We know what we like of each other's tastes already at this point, which is a great thing. And so a lot of for reading the scripts are based on a graphic novel. So in this instance, it was already kind of heavily visually orientated, or, from the get-go. So it wasn't any great surprise that when we, started having conversations in earnest, that the visions were aligned, already to a huge degree. These directors, they're very, very visual themselves, and so they, definitely love this shot from this movie. Love this lighting from that movie. So we do incorporate, we trawl through a big amount of reference imagery, being it whether it's, stills, photography, paintings, or from movies, documentaries. So we definitely are influenced by what's around. And, sometimes we, also just have a reference that we love and go, how can we make that kind of thing work into a particular scene? So we'll actually turn it the other way and go, actually, the visual comes first. And what the scene is, a guy on a phone box. Like, there's a million ways to shoot a guy on a phone box.
Right.
So,
and then you use the movie, what was it, Paycheck as the reference? Who was it? I think it was like Ben Affleck or someone was stuck in a phone box for the entire, Josh Hartnett or something like that, for the entire movie. Oh no, it's called Phone Booth.
Right, there you go. Paycheck and a phone booth. So it depends. It also depends on who you're working with as to how much they want to dig into the visuals for reference, and how much influence they want themselves.
Yeah.
I like it when everyone's coming at it together, because that means you're already halfway there, instead of having to kind of start from the beginning and push something onto someone who doesn't necessarily know what they want. That's a big hill to walk up, But I think most directors would never be in that position anyways.
Yeah.
Parents have an idea of what they want their film to look like.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to Eric Messerschmidt a few months ago, and I might be like misquoting him a bit, but the gist of it was like, he was like, if I could just do pre-production the whole time and not shoot the movie, that'd be great. Do you kind of feel that way, where like pre-production is kind of the fun part, and then production is where, even though that's what our job is, like that's where everything gets worse because that's compromise time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, pre-production is the dreaming, right? I mean, you have what seems like infinite amount of time to wormhole through every possible angle of what could be the best thing ever. Every phone box conversation can have its own mythical beauty to it, or dirty reality. And then you go on the scouts and you're like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's cool. I can still retain a bit of that vision. And then you come to the shoot and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
It's pouring with rain, or that's good, or whatever. I mean, things definitely do. You learn to temper your expectations when you come onto the shoot, and it's often you're really surprised as well. It's like, oh my God, this did all come together, from all those crazy meetings that we had in pre-production when no one was quite ready to be 100% committed or committal to the, this is the actual final, this is the line in the sand, this is what we want.
Yeah.
Things just show up. You're like, that's really great.
Yeah.
Great. We did put in there 120%.
It's interesting how I don't know if you've experienced this on like when you were doing smaller shoots, but certainly from my experience, pre-production seems to be the least valued thing for a lot of indie thing, or like commercials. For instance, you'll get a call like, hey, are you available tomorrow? And you're like, what are we doing? And they're like, we'll tell you when you get here. And you're like, crying out loud. Like, it's like pre-production is not, but it's like quote unquote free. It's free to dream.
Yeah. I mean, there's the dreaming, and the budget reality crunch happens somewhere in there, or you're dreaming and you're imagining all these great shots, and then you're told that the actor can't drive. So you're like, okay. So there's and there's many things, and there's many workarounds, of course, as we all know, but so long as the pre has already established that that's the dream, and this will be the workaround.
Yeah.
So you always have to have the A and the B plan, just in case. I mean, the first AD that we were working with at the moment was like, rolling his eyes, going, well, it's better than we know now, because on a job not so long ago, he had a particular actor who said they could drive, and come the sunset shot that they were wanting that actor to drive in, and at that point the actor decided to admit that they couldn't drive.
Like physically, or like the government would be upset?
Physically, could have never done before, even though it says, clearly in the script, driving,
right,
through the sunset.
He's like, I thought this was going to be volume. Up
to the house, into the close up. Like,
yeah.
So I mean, it's like, you want to mitigate as many of those surprises as possible, without trying to crush the dreaming. Yeah. So I always feel like in pre, it's like, okay, let's keep the dreaming alive, but let's also be really practical. Have a real practical page going on side by side, so you're prepared for both.
Yeah, no, that's certainly a hard thing that I struggle with, which is, and not just with filmmaking, but anything which is like my brain automatically, I can't say I say no, but my practical brain jumps in very quickly. Someone will come at me with something they're very excited about, and then I'll start overthinking it and giving them roadblocks to not to tell them not to do it, but to be wary of. And I know that comes off as annoying as hell.
Yeah, I mean, I think early on in films, when I was a focus puller, I remember watching a director people would be like, oh, this is going to be really difficult. This is going to be really challenging because of this and this and this reason, and all valid reasons. And watching him just go, yeah, but it's not difficult if we do it like this. And he was right. And so all of the things that people had built up, all these like, oh God, there's going to be so many reasons. Oh God, there's, so many things that will, take time and money and blah, 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 blah. He had already preempted a lot of that and knew his workaround for how to make it efficient and quick or just work. And that was Peter Jackson.
Yeah. I was going to say.
So I learn early on to be like, all right, there's many brains involved in this business, and many brains have completely different ways of working and seeing how to solve a puzzle.
Yeah. I've had the privilege of interviewing a handful of Kiwi folks. Callan Green was just on the show. Oh, crap. I'm blanking on his name, but the production designer from Lord of the Rings, who did Power of the Dog.
Oh God, now you've done that.
I'm the host and I can't remember his name. And
Grant Major.
Grant Major, yes. Yeah, he's the best. And then I had Ari Wegner on. And besides her, all y'all worked on Lord of the Rings. And it seems to be this ongoing joke that if you were alive in the 90s in New Zealand, you happened to work on that film.
Of course. I mean, that industry was, it needed every single body available. We started out with one unit, and Peter Jackson and Andrew Leslie saying it was a one camera shoot.
No.
Cut to 7 units, about 50 cameras, and people running all over the country.
Yeah. So what got you to be a focus puller on that series? Because I imagine were you just pulling focus beforehand, or were you freelancing, or?
I was freelancing. I had met and worked with the A Camera First, who came over from Australia with Andrew, and we had done a big commercial together where I was seconding for him, and he asked me to do it. So I started out on Lord of the Rings seconding, and then, because we had 4 cameras in the main unit truck, and I was like, so who's running these other cameras? And day one, we pull out 2 cameras. Day one, shot 1, 2 cameras. Day second, shot 2 cameras. So I was, and I had focus pulled on and off before, more indie projects and stuff and myself. So I wasn't afraid of it and I knew how to do it. But definitely a huge learning curve. But yeah, so we kind of bopped around like that for quite a while, that I would just step up and do B camera when needed. And then as things started ramping up, then officially I got B camera. So
yeah,
that was a good thing.
Yeah, that's rad. I mean, just looking over your CV, like, I think you kind of have the more enviable position of often doing second unit. Because I personally think second unit's the most fun unit.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, it's nice to be able to continue on from someone's vision and make sure that it's an interesting thing to be coloring in this exactly the same. I mean, everyone's got a slightly different stroke of hand, but so it's nice to do that well, and also because at the same time, then you also get to dream of how you'd do it differently if you would just fully in charge. I mean, second unit's great and it can be a lot of fun. It can also be tricky in that you get half the resources
sure,
and half the talent, so you're definitely trying to cobble things together that main unit have this kind of half abandoned, and here you go, you can
nice.
Shoot this corner because all the rest of the set's been pulled down.
I shot second unit on this one film, and it's the only feature I've ever worked on, and I had to double as the driver of this ambulance. The passenger gets shot, so the driver has to pull him in, and it's my arm, and I still have my like COVID safe bracelet on and like my tattoos and stuff. It's so obviously me. but no one noticed.
No one cares. No one noticed. No one cares.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was I got to meet a few people who worked on. Again, I was just bopping through your IMDb, and you've worked on so many cool projects. I got to meet a handful of folks recently who worked on Rebel Moon, so they were giving me some BTS on that. But I was wondering what your experience was. I didn't even realize there was a B cam. I assume for like the action stuff, because I always thought that Snyder kind of just at this point rolls his own camera.
Yeah, that was a cool job for me because Rebel Moon rang up and said, "Hey, we've got this giant film starting. Do you want to come and do it and do work on the main unit and then split off and do second unit?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's cool." I had a little indie movie that I was meant to do, and the date started shifting there, and I was like, "Oh, okay." So I ended up calling back Rebel Moon, but saying I will take this, but be knowing that I'm going to go and jump off and do this other project when it solidifies. And of course, the other project, it just kept pushing. So I had a huge amount of time on Rebel Moon, which was fantastic because the team that Zach and Deborah have around them, lovely, super lovely people. Everyone's really dedicated and hardworking, but having fun, Yeah. So again, when I got hired, they were like, "Oh, Zach always likes to be on a camera," and I'm like, "Zach, why don't you just sit down and watch the monitors?
Right.
You're going to miss. Otherwise, you're going to miss what the A camera is doing. I'm here. There isn't a C camera shot on this at the moment, so I would." And I think it took a couple of days for him to be like, he totally let me, but then it was like he kept on trying to think he needed to initiate it. I'm like, "Zach, sit down.
Right.
Director, be the director. You're the director, the DP, the producer, the writer. I think you've got enough hats on,
Right.
And so, after that first few days, I was just doing B camera, and then, split off as much as we needed to go and do second unit.
When you're doing, because you did what? Peanut Butter Falcon, which I loved, True Detective, Rebel Moon. When you're doing these second unit things, is there anything that comes to mind that you've sort of learned from maybe the DP that you're, for lack of a better term, copying or matching, or any like tricks that kind of you were like, "Oh, that's an interesting way to think about that," or is it all kind of like using your own mental tools to replicate something that maybe you don't know the setup for or whatever?
I mean, I do spend, making sure that I've watched a lot of dailies, and or had a good amount of time shadowing on set, just so that I'm well versed in the language, obviously stylistically, and how it's achieved. Speaking with all the heads of departments, so not only the DP, that the gasser, the grip, and just preempting the team with them that I'll need, and again, like the resources left over, because often you're sharing, you're begging and borrowing and stealing from Maine. I mean, and you just do, once you kind of get into what the tools are being used and how they're being used as board strokes, then you can kind of figure it out from seeing physically how it's done and then watching the rushes and seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't felt like there's ever been a case where it's never been a case of like, go off and just do what you want, because it's, obviously sitting so tightly in the script. And then like True Detective, we ended up doing, I was also not only doing second unit, but where Nigel would go and I would prep the incoming director and go and do scouts with that person, and then Nigel would have like 2 days or generally like 2 days with the new director going through the scout. So then I would go and take over main unit. So it was kind of
That's cool.
a leapfrog situation. And then more and more towards the back end of that schedule, I would do second unit, full second unit with mainly with the main characters doing scenes that main unit just hadn't had the time to shoot. So, it definitely became a kind of like spread out the resources and everybody just hands on deck to get it all finished.
Yeah. When you're working on a show that has like multiple directors and multiple DPs and stuff, how, especially like, well, I feel like Masters of the Air probably was a little more because it was like a mini series, but like especially on a longer show, how are you keeping everything consistent? What do those conversations look like between sort of the heads of department? Is there like often a Bible that y'all are looking at, or is it different for every show?
I guess all the shows that I've worked on have been anthology, and that, it hasn't been back-to-back series. It's been like True Detective was, season 2 was its own storyline, right? So it had its, and every series has had its own lookbook, or movie has had its own, lookbook to work from. And not to say, like for Masters of the Year, we, there was a lookbook created, and that our episodes 5 and 6 were the beginning of a departure. So the characters were, we did the last big battle in episode 5. So from then on, the characters weren't as tied to the military base as they had been in the previous 1 to 4 episodes. So although that there was this Bible, we got to create our own from thereafter. And then the episodes that came after that, of course, had a much broader world that the characters were moving through. So Bibles can change. The Bible that was created for Masters of the Air was good up until a point, and then it springboard off from there, and always staying within the same world, because we, none of the directors or the DPs from the other blocks wanted to change that in any considerable way, but it certainly gave us more scope to experiment and play around with, because we had we had new characters and we had different locations.
Yeah. One thing I really love about the show is how it really, I think, straddles the line in a gorgeous way between modern and not vintage, but period. It's not the classic like, oh, let's shoot everything on old diffuse. Obviously you got Dan Sasaki making your own lenses, which is probably the secret. So whenever anyone asks like, why doesn't my movie look like that? I'm like, well, they probably had Dan.
Yeah.
I was actually reading, you're in this guy, the April edition of the ASC magazine, and it mentions that and stuff. But what were kind of the touchstones for that look? Was there a conscious effort to make it feel a little more? Like in my head, I feel like all the Apple stuff has a similar look, but everyone I've spoken to who has worked on an Apple show, it's more so that they just pick high quality stuff and it all just looks high quality. It's not like there's a similar look.
Yeah, I would think it was similar looking. In fact, it started out being one thing and ended up being quite different. Which was, there was many kind of conversations that led to its final look. And there was, I think there was always the understanding that, it's a long running, 9 episodes. It was going to be 10 originally when we were filming it. So, 10 episodes of World War II, how to keep a modern audience engaged, because a lot of, many people were well aware that the audience who were really going to tune into this initially were Band of Brothers Pacifica fans,
Right.
and beyond, World War II veterans who are dying breed. So then it's the, okay, how do we keep this interesting for an audience, modern, a younger audience?
Yeah.
And there was the idea to kind of make it more vintagey feeling, dove into all of the reference documentaries that had been made and were taking a lot of cues from there. But, it's incredibly polished up.
Yeah.
And incredibly beautifully composed. So,
yeah,
I think it's definitely written a very nice line between feeling modern and accessible and of the period.
Yeah, because like when I think of, for instance, like Saving Private Ryan, I don't know if it's just because I'm older, but I imagine a younger audience thinks that looks vintage. But I remember when it came out, it felt very modern. It wasn't a sepia tone kind of thing. And obviously the tight shutter angle and all that was brand new for us.
Yeah.
Bleach Bypass, what? Actually, to be fair, Bleach Bypass was kind of new then. Or whatever it was. ENR.
Right.
Who gets to decide what those Frankenstein lenses look like? Like, is that a group effort, or is there like a main DP or does main director that goes like, all right, I want these? Because I think in the magazine it says it's like they're like Petsful and like
the Petsful. It's funny because Adam and Carrie got those on, and I think all of the work that they did with them got cut out. Yeah, I've got this in 5 and 6. There's a bunch of. Was it 5? Sorry, I'm losing my memory now of when they fit in. But there's a bunch of kind of a montage of relating to the amount of people that didn't make it back from the battle, and the loss of and their personal items and such, and destroyed planes and things. Where we had the Petsfels on. And that's, it's definitely like, okay, we want something to be emotive and odd and ethereal. So that's why in our episodes we use those lenses. And at the moment, like the show I'm just about to start on, we've got some vision moments where a character's been shot and they're basically on their way to dying. And so again, we're experimenting with some lenses that are not what you'd normally, run a show kind of lenses. And then I've got a bunch of flashback sequences. And again, so I want to have a different set of lenses for those. But I was in Panavision the other day, and Dan Sasaki was coming up with some crazy, great things to put on the front of the run of show lenses. So that may be that, so we're going to experiment around with those and see which is a better look to go for these kind of adapters that go on the front and move things around, or, and color bias the image a lot, or go through a couple of different sets of lenses. So and that becomes a collective decision, between myself and the directors to say, does everyone like this look for the flashbacks? Does everyone like this for the visions? And you can do it in post. You can do a lot of that work in post as well. But time and money. And not being as in control of it potentially.
Yeah, that's actually something that. Speaking of Messerschmitt, he turned me on to this plugin for Resolve called Scatter. And it is, as far as I can tell, a pretty accurate diffusion simulator. And the thing that I like about it is, when you're backlit or whatever, obviously, sometimes the diffusion looks great for the subject, and then there's like a window that gets all great. You can just key it out and then like tune it down or whatever. And it's really like, you pick which one you want. You can choose strength, you choose your focal length. Like, it seems to be mapped to like actual lens. It's really cool. But yeah, just from what you told me about the references of this new show, I think it might be something that I'm into. So I'm looking forward to that. What else was I going to say? Oh, just the lighting in the show feels so natural. And I was wondering, is it one of those things where it truly is just natural and it looks like that, or it was super difficult to make it look that natural and you've got lights everywhere?
Yeah, we do have lights everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, Adam Akapo's, he's got a beautiful, beautiful eye for minimal naturalistic lighting. And there's a lot of work that goes into that.
Yeah,
sure. And I like that approach too, very much. So, yes, there's lights here.
What does like an average setup kind of look like if we're talking just like not in the plane, because I know that's like a whole we actually I'd love to get into that in a minute, but just like all the kind of the on the ground stuff, interiors.
I mean, on that show that we used the sky panels 90% of the time, actually, because it was that thing we didn't want screaming hard light. Right. Screaming backlight going in there, so it was more about just softly filling the spaces. And I think the English, light is you often get that. Even in the summertime, there's a certain softness to that, to their sunlight. There's a couple of shots in the series that where the sun is just like super crisp, and it really stands out because most of the time there's just a certain amount of kind of gentle haze that's in the sky, and so there's a couple of shots you're like, what the hell? It looks like someone's just dialed up all the it looks like you've walked into a hotel in a TV in a hotel suite,
right?
But it's just, and it was just two particular shots that the sun just really peaked. But yeah, no, the main, and again, it was like, it's World War II, and they didn't have a lot of lighting going on, and for the nice exterior work, all the shutters were always meant to be drawn, and the curtains always were meant to be closed on anything. So, again, it was that thing of not necessarily relying on what how to light. It was more just, okay, this is it. And it's a somber storyline. And so you kind of, it's keeping it all very calm. Yeah.
I actually, I didn't forget, but it skipped me real quick. I actually just recently spoke to your production designer, and he was telling me how, what's that?
Chris.
Was it Chris? Oh no.
Chris Seegers.
Was it someone else? Who was I talking to? Let me look. This is why I said this is the casual podcast, because I have time. Oh no, it's James Philpott. That's a different show. Never mind. Anywho, who was I talking to?
Anyway.
Yeah, it's
someone about something.
Somebody about something. Well, now I don't want to reference a show that isn't yours. Sometimes I do like 6 of these in a row, and then I'm like, who was that? But yeah, anyway, a lot of to the point that I was getting at was when you're talking about that somber tone, it is just, I was fascinated by how a lot of these, in all the episodes, not just yours, there's like this ability to keep everything, especially in these interiors. Exteriors are interesting as well, but these interiors have this like base level and soft contrast that still has like depth to it and doesn't just look like log footage or whatever, because it could easily go just kind of washy. And so it does look like you guys have a really like a depth touch at keeping. How much of that was in the grade, or did you like pre-build the LED, I imagine, and then just work with that?
Yeah, it was pre-built. It changed a lot actually in post. Apple wanted to shift the look of it quite a lot. So, and not to say that that was in a bad way. They wanted something. They wanted it a bit more polished up. So things did definitely get. It's not like we needed to add more in post and tweak things that much. It was just a different color palette, basically. So I think regardless of what we had shot on the day, it lent itself to both. The original look was going to be a lot bluer and cooler overall. But yeah, it was decided that to push more into the browns and the greens. And it's a good choice, Like it was, it's just that, there's so many opinions in the end, and that's the way it went. So be it. But I think that, one thing that Chris Segas, who was our production designer, did, he gave us these locations, interiors that did have a lot of depth to them, and they did often all kind of feel dusty, and there was already a patina in there, of course, when he ages everything beautifully. But then interesting because they, like on the military base, for example, I mean, all of that stuff's brand new. It gets erected for the war, and it's and it's basically stuff that's hot off the shelf, as it were. So it's a kind of delicate blend of things that have just come out of the box, but in your mind's eye, making them aged, so that nothing feels new and squeaky. And of course it doesn't, because it's period. So anything for us now looks older, but they were also making sure that there's a lot of reach to everything.
Yeah, because that was something that kind of took me a while to figure out, that like a lot of good production designers will design the room with sort of, I suppose, not tableaus, but like frames in mind. Were you able to have a discussion with Chris about what you needed for your episodes, or were those kind of pre-built?
All the base was pre-built. Well in advance of me arriving. And even like even Chris said on an interview the other day that the B-17 had been decided even before he joined, that they were going to pre-build two of these planes. So there's all these decisions that happen along the way, and whether you're on the project or not at that point depends. And then when we got into leaving the base and going to the Flack House and going to Oxford, I mean, those locations, they are what they are.
Yeah.
I mean, gorgeous in their own right. And so, we're happy. You can't go wrong because it's just so beautiful.
Yeah. When was this your first experience using the volume? Because you guys used a big ass volume too.
Yeah. It was. Yeah.
What was that learning curve like? Because I've heard from multiple DPs who have had to use it, and it does seem like the dream of this will make everything easier was maybe a little oversold.
I think it often is, and I mean, knowing that, like even The Mandalorian, it was like, yeah, we did everything, and it's like, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
There was lots of work that needed to be done in post, and that's fine, and it's just everyone needs to know that, like, it's not a solve all, and it totally depends on how picture ready the assets are.
Right.
Because if they're not ready, then you're not ready. It effectively becomes a giant blue screen or eyeline machine. And it was invaluable to us for so many reasons, like that. We could use, I could use it for lighting. We could use it interactively. The cast members all loved being able to track the planes and the missile fire was going past at, an accelerated rate. So for so many reasons, it was incredible for us to have. Stephen Rosenbaum, who was our VFX supervisor, had a huge amount of work to do in post, though, to make it picture ready.
Yeah.
And plus, because also the the main cockpit of the plane we had on a gimbal that was 30 feet in the air, 25 feet in the air. And so we had to rig as many cameras in as many places as possible, often through windows, and knowing that he would be scrubbing out.
Right.
So we're also, in order to get through what we needed to on a daily basis, it was like, okay, we're sacrificing now what is out that window. What, would normally be, okay, we're using that asset on the wall. We're going to put a camera there now instead.
Yeah. Well, it does feel like the two things that the volume are great for, which as you kind of mentioned, is like, if I think about the Mandalorian, it's like his helmet is going to reflect everything if you use a blue screen. So it's like perfect for that. Cockpit, very reflective. Cards, very reflective, for that thing. And then also, as you said, actors. I imagine other things might be, less ideal if you're just using it. Oh, we could just shoot this instead of being outside. It's like, maybe we just go outside.
But then, things like, and there's a scene that we shot, which never made the cut, but one of the crews who goes down in one of the episodes, I did some work as well on Adam's episodes, but so one of the ones was a plane that everyone had to bail out of, and they landed in the ocean, and then we see those cast members in a life raft, rubber dinghy, floating out in the ocean, not knowing what the hell was going to happen to them. And we shot that on the volume, and it's like, that was great, because had we, there was no way we're going to, in our tight production schedule, going to be able to shoot that.
Right.
Or build a tank, like build a tank for one setup. So one scene. So in that instance, we wouldn't have been able to shoot that. I mean, it didn't make the cut, but we wouldn't have been able to shoot that scene if we hadn't had the volume there.
Sure.
Easily. It was beautiful. The water at night, and it was like, it looked great.
Was the, I suppose, touch line between the dinghy and the water, was that going to be VFX'd in? Or yeah. Because that would have been interesting. We should just get like a baby pool, put the dinghy in the baby pool, and be like, close enough.
Yeah. No, it was a big boat, and it was a big deal to do what we did, because we had to take the cockpit off this huge gimbal and put the dinghy on there. So we had, it was definitely a thing, but it worked. And I mean, the other thing that was about the volume wall was, so when Anna and Ryan, who were the directors I worked with, when we were in pre and we're working out the battle sequence work and what was important for them to see their characters go through, meant that the post, there wasn't enough time to pitch perfect the assets that they needed. Of that plane's up there, now it falls down here. There's just so many tiny details of, when that plane's falling, this one over here is exploding. So, what was important for Anna and Ryan to get their characters involved with visually wasn't going to be ready. I mean, this was,
You mean the assets in Unreal?
Exactly. Like the assets were never going to be ready in time. So, and I think that's the thing about the volume is like how you can, what you want to do, but being able to be, so much in pre-production, it's that dreaming the stage again, right? And to be perfectly locked down for everything, to give those people enough time to go away and create the assets. I mean, that's huge. That's a huge timeline in between. And it's not a couple of weeks out from shooting.
Yeah, video games aren't made in a day.
No. So that's the kind of thing that I wish people were more aware of, that it's a big lag between the reality of what is needing to be built for the assets to what's actually, when you're in the stage shooting.
So were you just using sort of like stand-in planes, like that might have been like an F-16 or whatever, and you just had to replace it? Yeah. That's interesting. But yeah, I think that That's very educational. I read that you guys had like how many cameras like Rialtoed up in the cockpit?
Up to 9, 8 or 9.
So you were just running this like a play, just like do it again, do it again.
Well, it was interesting because when Anna and Ryan and I started Block 1 with Adam and Carrie had been doing the volume for only 6 weeks before we jumped in and started. And we got given this like roadmap of like, these are all the rigging points to get, cockpit angles. And so we're like, okay, let's do it. Let's, put all the cameras in there and do it. And then we were like, after day 1, we're like, it's not for us. Yeah. It didn't give us this, what we wanted from our characters, which was the sense of this battle going to be the last for a lot of them. We really felt like we needed less angles and concentrate more on movement with the cameras and getting closer to the actors and being with them a lot more. So we created our own roadmap of what to do.
And you had said in that article that a lot of these angles were built on or sort of inspired by documentary footage you'd seen, not other films necessarily, right?
Yeah, exactly. Five Come Back is a beautiful documentary of great filmmakers and great camera, working cameramen going and being in these planes. So people who really understood composition and light, and terrifying for them. They had also done some super cool rigs where they had put the planes and put the cameras in positions where you're just like, oh my god, how the hell is that little camera holding on the wings as it's taking off and flying? So someone's got a remote somewhere sitting inside the plane trying to roll a little bit of footage. Yeah, so it's very impressive, the beautiful angles they got.
And also the fact that the military was like, yeah, go ahead and put a camera on the wing. That won't affect us at all.
I mean, when you realize how being in those planes and realizing, because I built them all, as per spec, there was nothing to them. It's terrifying. It's terrifying how thin that metal is, and that really a bullet just rips through it like paper.
Yeah. Because it is just like sheet metal, right? It's like sheet metal, gap sheet metal, right?
And it's thin. It's thinner than my finger.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's flying with all these people on board.
And it's tight too. It's like tight like a tank. Like everyone's just kind of mushed together.
Yeah. And the only place that there's some room is the waist, but nearly in the radio room, but nearly everywhere else that's like I got into the tail section and my shoulders were too wide to be in there. I got into the ball turret and it's like, and I'm 5'6", so, and I didn't have all the leathers, the big, huge leather jackets and the big pants that they had on to keep themselves warm. So, yeah, being out.
Oh, that's the other thing. There's no insulation in those guys either.
No, it's like 50 degrees below Celsius. I'm talking about. It was staggering what they put themselves through.
Now, because you guys built the planes, what was the reasoning behind not doing the classic kind of like just make it 10% bigger to accommodate the crew?
Because, it was just early on, again, this was decided that, no, keep it to the reality. And then went to any wild walls and then, it's like, no, you get what you get. When we had the cockpit up on, so when we're in the stage work, we had the cockpit up on a gimbal, which was the cockpit, and then below was the bombardier's area. And we would take windows out to get cameras in to help with the reflections. But other than that, there was nothing, there were no wild walls anywhere.
what was your average focal length in there then? Because you're shooting full frame on the Venice.
Yes. We were 20, 25, 27, 35s. We didn't often see the whole thing, We
Right.
Actually, 25 is probably too wide even. It's a while back now.
Yeah. Yeah. When did you guys shoot this? I didn't actually look that
2021.
21, really? Wow.
I'm losing the plot now too.
Well, and you had mentioned a couple of times that you had a compressed schedule. How long did you have to shoot at least your 2 episodes?
Gosh, when did I go there? I went there in May. We had a very unusual thing because COVID was still obviously a huge factor, and then it launched into the English summer, and they opened up all the restrictions on going out. So block 1 ahead of us they started getting snagged with shutdowns for COVID. And so when we started, Apple said, we don't want any risks anymore. So we're going to PCR every single person on set before you're allowed to start shooting. So sometimes in our day, we wouldn't start shooting till like 3.5 hours into the day. It was an absolute nightmare, but it actually made us able to keep rolling. We never shut down because anyone who got pinged was not allowed on set automatically. So, it wasn't like a couple of days later we found out they had COVID. So, that helped us keep going. So in terms of days, I can't actually tell you because I can't remember, because it was very protracted because of this COVID, protocol that Apple had insisted on.
Yeah. I mean, it's 3 hours a day delay is probably better than 2 weeks compressed, getting shut down. Yeah,
for sure. And we got lucky. We never really had any. None of our cast members got COVID while we were shooting, so we were good. There had been some pretty significant stand downs in block 1, and because the cast is predominantly like mid-20, early 30-year-old men, and it was like, here comes the English summer, dude, they're going to go out to the pubs.
I was going to say, it's pub time.
Yeah.
Especially, we're in a Spielberg film, but
yeah,
ladies.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, they couldn't pull that card until we finished.
Did you shoot out of order, or like because I had read that you went back and helped with the first block. Was your block shot first, or were you just doing them simultaneously?
So when block 2 started working, block 1 was doing their volume work, and then they basically ran out of time on location. So then we came and started our location work, and then we went into the volume work and finished. Yeah, essentially we finished our 2 episodes before block 1 had got through all of their work. And then Adam needed to take off for some family reasons. So then I went and filled in for him and completed work for block 1 that needed to be finished off. Gotcha. And at that point there was, block 1 work and block 3 work had started by then as well. So it was, there was definitely leapfrogging going on for the actors and locations, but most of that was ended up being on the volume that we did for Adam. Yeah.
Where did your relationship with Adam start? Because I had read that you were suggested. He got you on the shoot, basically.
Yeah. We knew each other he actually came out to New Zealand from Australia, Lord of the Rings days. He contacted Andrew Leslie and said, can I come and observe for, some time and check it out? And he did, and that's where we first met. And then the New Zealand and the Australian film industry is pretty tight, and a lot of there's a lot of crossover people. And so, I'd go over to Australia and be working over there and run into Adam and, kind of connections through work and friends of friends and such. So, we've known each other for a good chunk of time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was absolutely over the moon when he said, will you come and do it? And I had the interview with Anna and Ryan, and I really balls that up. The interview with them, and then I went back and I was having a look at some interviews that they had done with people, and they made mention on an interview of saying they thought they didn't get a job, that they really balls it up. And I was like, oh, please, maybe they have some sympathy for someone who feels like they really balls up their interview. Yeah. And then a few days later, I get a phone call and I'm in a supermarket with my son, who's 7 or 8 at the time, and I'm like, how quickly can you get to the UK?
You're like,
next week?
Son, get the kayak. Get kayak on your phone.
Yeah, we're going. So, Adam had pushed me, and then Anna and Ryan, they interviewed him a bunch of people. So I got lucky. I got really lucky.
Sure. I should have asked this at the beginning, but who are the sort of DPs that you look up to and kind of maybe have shaped the way that you shoot? Who?
I mean, it was funny because, growing up in New Zealand, Adam was doing beautiful work, and so was Greg Fraser. We were all well aware of these, great people who had amazing eyes. I always stall when I get to this. People ask me, what? You can guess all the usuals.
Yeah, sure.
I'm a big, Deacons, because, that the world of where things don't get too complicated lighting wise and structure wise, that, that's my jam. People who keep it honest and natural. And
it is so fascinating how, at least for me, I went from, obviously in the indie world, you don't have access to a lot of gear. So you're doing your best. And sometimes that remains your best looking shit. And then you get finally access to stuff, and then you overdo it. And then you go back to using one light, but it's just a little bit different, maybe just a little bigger or something. And it's so interesting how sometimes like the best looking stuff literally is just like the diffused window.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And people who, I think that's what I really appreciate with Adam's work, is that, people are like, oh, the masters are there, you must have had gear everywhere. That's so much. Like, we didn't really.
Yeah.
It's and the work that I did on the King for him, when I did second unit on the King as well, it was just like, there was we could have gone really over the top with it, and he certainly used a lot of light, but in a very natural way with very meager resources.
Yeah. I suppose it's all about motivation for the light more so than, because that's where it starts to look like shit, right? When you start like backlights come out of nowhere, like, which unless you're doing like a 50s, kind of send up or whatever, sure, like old studio look, but it's not about the number of lights, it's about how many of them go past here, I guess,
or how many of them you turn off.
What's that, the Gordon Willis interview where he's just like, you see that one where he's just got like a light bulb and he goes, I think this is good, and then he like turns it off and he goes, that's better, that's good, I like that.
I mean, that's in this show that I've got coming up, I'm constantly reminding myself to be bold with like turn it off.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to that show whenever it does come out, and I hope we can have you back to chat about it. But I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about Matches of the Air for the past hour.
Oh, and other stuff.
and other stuff. Yeah, well, that's the goal. Is hopefully we talk about a bunch of stuff, but since the PR people are here, I have to mention it.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's yes, we're excited to see. It's been really nice hearing from people all over the globe how much they enjoyed it. So
yeah, I look forward to
really
picking
cool thing, and I wish actually that I'd been a bit. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. I was saying I look forward to picking it up on Blu-ray because I just collect physical media.
Right.
But you were saying something more important.
And I was just saying how I wish I'd actually been in the UK, because I think from people over there, it sounds like it's just had such a huge following, I guess, because there's mainly British actors in it, so it's shot in British soil, so it's been really hyped up over there.
Sure. Well, I'll go ahead and let you go, but again, thank you so much for spending the time with me. I hope we can chat about the next show.
Cool. Okay, nice one. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by Pro Video Coalition. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can go to frameandrefpod.com and follow the link to buy me a coffee. It's always appreciated, and as always, thanks for listening.